Welcome, everybody. My name is Robert D. Monti, and thank you for joining Literally Alive. Tonight, poet Kate Kearns reads with special guest, award-winning poet Janet Sylvester. Kate's poems have appeared in numerous literary journals, including Salamander and Northern New England Review, in the Maine Sunday Telegram, and on Maine Public's Poems from Here. You Are Ruining My Loneliness is her debut collection, published by Littoral Books. She lives with her family in southern Maine. Kate, welcome back to Literally Alive.
Hey, Robert, it's fun to be back already.
Yeah, I think it would be most fitting for you to introduce our wonderful guest tonight, Janet Sylvester.
Yes, I'm really excited to introduce Janet. I've been wanting to read with her for a long, long time. And even though we've known each other since 2007, this is our first time reading together. So it's very exciting. Janet and I met because she was my teacher at Lesley University when I did my MFA program. And then I graduated and declared to her that we were now friends. And we have been ever since. We go on many adventures together and do a lot of eating and looking at animals and many things that are between us. Her cat now will make eye contact with me, which is a big deal. Who you will hear about, I'm sure. So I'm really excited to have Janet here too, because it's bringing things a little bit full circle. A few years ago, pre-pandemic, but not by much, Janet said, "Hey, I'm coming to town to see another former student, now friend of mine, who's in a reading with this publisher called Littoral Books," and it was one of the anthologies, I believe. It might be North by Northeast, if I'm remembering correctly. And Robert was one of the authors included in that anthology and was going to be in that reading. And that was my first introduction to Littoral Books. When Agnes was on stage talking about, "Oh, we're going to be starting this contemporary Maine poetry series," Janet gently elbowed me in our seats because she knew I had a manuscript I was going to be sending out. So it's all coming full circle, and Janet's kind of an honorary Littoral Books member. And I'm going to introduce her now. I'm very excited because I've been waiting for so long. All right. Janet Sylvester. Actually, you know what? I should just give you a moment to say hello, Janet, before I go into the bio and all of that. Hello, Janet.
Hi, Kate. Good to see you again.
All right, everybody. Janet Sylvester, winner of the Lauria Frasca Poetry Prize at Bordighera Press, promoting the poetry of the Italian diaspora in English, a Pushcart Prize, a Pen Discovery Award, the Grolier Poetry Prize, a DeWitt Wallace Reader's Digest Fellowship to the MacDowell Colony, and fellowships at Yaddo and VCCA. Janet Sylvester's poems have appeared in many journals and anthologies, including, among others, Divining Dante, Best American Poetry, Virginia Quarterly Review, Georgia Review, Poetry Daily, Boulevard, Harvard Review, and Colorado Review. In fall of 2024, later this year, she'll be the Ofstad Writer in Residence at Truman State University in Missouri. Spencer Reese says of her third book, And Not to Break, "These poems shine with courage and resilience, containing what I am most looking for these days, hope. Hope is not an easy virtue to catch in paint or with words, yet here it is, captivating and multi-layered as in a Dürer or a Da Vinci." Mark Jarman in Hudson Review comments, "In Janet Sylvester's excellent new book and poem after poem, imagery, that God in the details, comes to the aid of a poet who shares her sorrows as richly as her joys." Highlighting a poem called Baby, Jarman says, "Anyone who cares about poetry will know who Baby is, or let me say, will recognize that she is poetry itself." Janet currently teaches expository and creative writing courses at Harvard Summer School, Harvard Extension, and Endicott College on Boston's North Shore. She lives in Rockport, Massachusetts with Thelma, a physically diminutive but mightily willful cat who rescued her in August 2021. Hello, Janet, officially.
Thank you.
Okay, so Janet and I are going to do a little bit of back and forth. So I'll read a couple poems, she'll read a couple poems. We'll see where we go forward. And at the end, we'll talk a bit, take questions and talk a bit about our new work that we have going on in development. I'm going to begin with, I actually chose my poems tonight based on, because I have a dear friend here and she's our guest, I chose poems that have to do with those relationships that aren't your significant other or your family, those relationships that are friends or people who are less often immortalized in poems. I had more of them than I thought when I was flipping through, so I'm excited to have them. All right. Let's see. I feel like I've been talking for a very long time, but I'm going to read poems now. Let's see. Invitation to a room. Bring your scruffy hair for praise, overgrown with witness to the room. Your body whole, not squared in blue lightness to the room. With heaven knows how many angels all riding on the broad black brim of your hat, please come flying. We won't go crowding out to eat, just us and a piece of room. How long since your voice boomed with the breath in it, since I nearly spat the wine? Come with your sweats on, those new earrings. The room buzzes with boredom. Come fill the vacuum with your lemon shampoo. I've cleared the comfortable chairs, lit the good candles. Here, there's room to set your glass and plate next to mine. Will I be with you again? Boundaries with nothing else to do, thin as orange hour dims the room. Friend, you're here. And ancestors, two young beloveds, just as present as you, just as wished for, as spoken to, fill no particular place in the room. How are you? How are you really? I've been dreaming toward train stations I never reach by morning. Bring nothing but yourself, your stress, to the room to rest. Here's coffee and bread. That novel you'd like. Our living and dead. Kate the elder who gave me her name, all accounted, at ease in the room. I began with that one because it was a pandemic poem for me. I was missing being in person in a room with my friends. And that was where that one came from. But as I was reading it, it's like, oh, a lot of these images apply to me and Janet. Coffee and bread and sitting in a comfortable chair. We do a lot of that. A lot of coffeeing and a lot of bread. I feel like I've been talking too long, so I'm going to toss it over to you, Janet, to read us some poems.
Okay, well, you know, as Kate said, she was looking to read poems about, rather than the inner circle, the family, but about friends, and do something a little different. And it's interesting when you discover a vein like that in your own work that you hadn't seen. And recently, and Kate knows about this because I've talked with her about it, I've been going over the extent of my work. I've been writing quite a long time, although I'm what I call a slow writer, so I don't have gazillions of books. I've got, depending on how you count, 3 or 4, and I'm working on a new one. But I've realized, and I don't know why it took me so long, but that I have this preoccupation with vision. Now, sometimes that has to do with visual arts, but more and more it has to do with sort of literal physical vision and the materials we use to bring that vision to others, and the gap between that and what ends up, in my case, on the page, because I think that's where the art happens. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with 2 poems, one from my second book and one from the new book, that address this in different ways. And the first is called Aerial Photography. There's the first section of my second book is poems about being a young woman in America during the Vietnam War. And this goes back to childhood, the Cuban Missile Crisis, but I think we all know at this point what aerial photography is. I look to ground, find her, one chip glittering, mark a site beside the aquamarines of suburban pools. It is 1961. Her red suit ties behind the neck. At her hips, a ruffle floats. On it, a line of white sails make their circuit across her bottom. Face down, she's big enough, spread-eagled, to touch fingertips, toes, to the circumference of the world on its outside painted fish, their smiles moving to the right. Her shoulder blades islands, she rocks to wash their hot with cold. She drifts, snorkel mask cinched to her head. She knows exactly, eyes closed, the imminent action 30 years from now, its surgical type Operation Starlight in the jungle's triple canopy where she'll lie prone on the comforter her great aunt made. It might as well be Batangan. Black and white on a screen behind her, injuries dragging their injuries downstairs, surrounded by the living room's pale oak, her parents enacting their nightly raid with gin for firepower, the dog belly dragging its terrier self under her bed. She's hidden a survival bag like a sibling, washcloth, Band-Aids, plastic comb, doll's dress, saturated in the shrubs beside her pool. She thinks, if I open my eyes, the word Cuba would bubble and cling to my blue hands, and capable of enduring love, she makes a face, high cheekbones, Cupid's bow, sardonic American chin, a series of places she'll study as they're advanced upon, each shot perfectly aimed at them, executed with athletic grace. Maybe you know the photos, glossy 8x10s, or how maps replace such cancellations where I am, deep in the blues and greens of Vertigo's topography, a height that cannot forget the planet's haze. And then the other very short poem I'm going to read is from the new book, And Not to Break. Actually not that new. Its publication date was April 2020, inarguably the worst publication date in history, given what was going on. And, one can't even be disappointed about that because something bigger than a book was going on around all of us. This poem is a short poem, 19 lines, called Field Glasses. And again, the issue of vision comes up. It's a difficult little form called a villanelle. I know one of my students is here, Natalia. You're going to be meeting villanelles tomorrow in class. And I could talk about the year it took me to write this one. It's called Field Glasses. And all I'd like to tell you is that in Provençal, a medieval language, the word refrain was refrania, R-E-F-R-A-N-H. And when I looked up the word refrain one day, because I couldn't get the repeated lines to work in the villanelle, I discovered that the word refrain also meant, or refrania meant bird song originally. And that spoke to me about how deep in nature the roots of poetry are. So this is called Field Glasses. Though birdsong shelters in the word refrain, that stallion, several mares, and pair of foals the water meadows utter, stand in rain. And noisy geese lift wings, black tipped to stain the sky above the reeds. The wind unrolls as their song shelters in the word refrain. I know that loss has nothing left to gain today from me. I'm made of parts and wholes, personified as standing water in the rain. And still the afternoon's gray circle drains ditch water into oily flame. The cold outside and in, despite the word refrain. 6 horses the ocean once contained, half drowned, half swam across the shoals, then jumped the meadows in the water, climbed the rain, to turn to me their dark regard. Darkly sane, a dream the world invents of time unfolds inside a water drop. The word refrains from Provençal, which spoke in birds and rain. It's all yours, Kate.
Ah, thank you. I do love villanelles. I have villanelle envy anytime somebody reads one. I haven't managed to write one that works yet. That wasn't just forced into place, which never works.
I know.
Oh, all right. I'm going to continuing with my theme of poems about unconventional relationships. I struggle sometimes with whether or not a poem should be addressed to a you or to a third person. And sometimes the you just remains mysterious to the reader, and that's okay with me, I think, most of the time. But this is one of those poems where the you is not fully defined, but I hope the connection and relationship is. This is called Letter at Midsummer. Out on the usual bramble trail, I offer up my bullshit banter. The way steady employment both fills and drains. My child's vegetarianism, the turns these furs have seen, the mosquitoes that will soon hatch from their puddles, anything to drown out the death that's sung to you since you were a child. Mycelial, it tethers your body soil to root, brims you, warm as the spring you sliver out of your skin. It's been on 11 lately. We didn't plan to head to the river mouth that changes every spring when the nor'easters go by, where our parents, their parents, learned to swim in the nude. But you and I and your death will end up there. I'll hold your hand in one of mine, your death in the other. Though I subscribe to death as a non-end, harmonious, my friend, I'm full of crap. Walk in the woods with me, your sorrow, your enormous dog, who scents the squirrel trail and eagers after crows, his rambling snout true to your side. When I was sending out the manuscript for You're Ruining My Loneliness, one of the people I sent it to turned it down because they thought there were too many swear words in it. And this was one of the ones that they thought they took offense with my use of the word bullshit in this poem. But that is the right word. There are only 2 or 3 swear words in the whole book. And I tried to put something else there and none of them worked. Bullshit was the word. Next one is another short one I love a short and mysterious poem sometimes. That this one is more about the friendships that are adjacent in your life. This is called The Aunties Are All Right. I know we don't censor. I know Agnes was fine with my swear words. The aunties are all right. My mom's beloved dead come to her in dreams. Uninterrupted, they talk. I want it to be true, that some glance of them reaches out, an empty glass in hand refilled. It floats, the trueness of it, edges tinking, clear and variable as an ice cube. The color of everything around it, color of everything. It cools the glass with its own water. All right. Back to you, Janet.
Hey, well, Kate walks dogs and has some unconventional friendships. And this poem that I plan to read, actually, so this is a great segue, is about walking a cat, because I don't have dogs. And I would call, this is my ex-cat who lived to be about 20 years old. I would definitely call that an unconventional relationship. By the end, I was referring to him as my husband or the world's oldest man, depending on. At any rate, this poem again, the question of vision is involved because the cat leads the speaker of the poem to a high place where she's able to find some perspective. This poem is called Barometric. After the October sky's unbleached fabric color above the federal building and God's snapshot of me and the bankruptcy lawyer shaking hands, after a palm full of flawed diamonds sold to a slick-haired salesman, certificates of deposit canceled and debts discharged, there was still the cat, confined for the first time to the house, and he wanted out, nose to the crack in the door, out, still strong enough at 17 to tear the carpet from beneath the lintel out, Gothic, slowly break 10 fingers on a blackboard, meowing, turned into a grating howl out. So we would go. Had I not let him stop to sniff the dead end of every branch beside the path that climbs around the knotted veins of the maples, the hill littered with plastic, amber glass, and a quick worm levering its length onto a leaf, he wouldn't, in increments of days, have led me to the meadow, a dead seminary's yard, overgrown, free in lowering dark. I had the city, its panoramic scroll I didn't know I'd find, and the cat jog-trotting, as if the walk were something he had to do for urban me, close reading a tree's hollow and the blackberry cane's unaesthetic tangle he'd belly crawl beneath and turn around, composed, to look at me. I started to clean, picking up a can or two each day, something to do while businessmen advanced toward polished cars in guarded lots. Like commerce, I expanded, collecting oxidizing springs, socks, a tie in a rain that needled dust to lace. We were nearly happy, the cat gnawing on grass that he might not throw up, the leaking braille of poison ivy blind in its advance across my arch. In bird song and its counterpoint, the hourly bus's diesel grind, the two of us were private, hermeneutes behind a broken building. Someone, driving west into the Berkshires late those afternoons, could never have seen or even dreamed us. On an orange leash, a woman deep in rubbishy thoughts walked by a gray tabby through wasteland the Mass Pike passes. How, as the rain came harder and she bent to lift him, the warm world twisted in her arms. You know, I think I'll just read that one for now, Kate. I think that's good as a standalone. So I'll pass it back to you.
That's one of my favorites. You'll actually be happy to know my daughter Grace, who Janet knows well, and some of you have met, I'm sure, is a major animal lover and kitty mom. And she has started to leash train our two cats, even though they do go outside. So a lot of it involves them doing this as she drags them down the hall with a harness on because they go outside and they don't need a leash to adventure, but she's doing it anyway. So
if you actually can leash train a cat, it's one of the most meditative walks you've ever taken. You spend a lot of time just standing there. So,
yeah, there's a lot of that.
yeah.
My husband and I we're just going to see how this plays out. We're just going to enjoy the view while she tries to leash train these two outdoor cats who know how to climb trees.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Janet and I actually took Grace on her first whale watch, and she was quite in love. So yes, she's a big part of she makes us into a trio sometimes.
It's true. It's
It
true.
actually works well that this next poem has her in it, even though it's about an adult friend whose our children are friends with each other, but the poem is more about her than Grace, but she's in it.
Mm-hmm.
This is called A Friend Says We're Too Old to Penguin Slide Down This Hill. My youth streaks indignant up my throat in protest and skids to a halt. We're high up, boots in soft powder, sanguine as our children face first themselves down a snowy slope worn slick with repetition. At 12, I'd have joined them. Breasts came full and fast that year, and we fought like young sisters. I'd have squashed them down that thorn-lined luge without a thought. My friend, she's right. Not too old, never that, but far enough along to unlearn self-destruction. Grass shows patches of green through thin packed ice as our kids fling themselves over and again, practicing their own contradictions. The signs their bodies send for danger translate into joy.
Mm.
My poems tend to be shorter, so they pile up a little faster. While I'm on adult friendships, I'll read this newer one, actually. I've gone rogue on my planned reading, but this also fits my theme. This is called Personal Essay on Intimacy.
Mm.
The woman who has cut my hair forever washes it in the usual sink, and as I'm sitting up, presses towel-covered fingers in my ears to dry that uncomfortable pool, deft as a habit. She's got the movement timed exactly right. My head upward, but not quite. Our custom is older than my marriage. Has she been doing that all along, and I only noticed today? She must do it for everyone. Even so, it's a comfort she doesn't have to give, and I didn't know I needed. A touch apart from love, and loving all the same.
Mm. Wonderful. I have, oh, look, you got a heart.
Oh, yeah.
Very nice. I want a heart too. Kate, I know you'll give me a heart someday. So.
Oh, it's coming.
Okay, well, I've got the one I'd like to read next is off my plan also, and this is sort of as a thank you to everybody who's here in our little audience and to Mainers. I actually was a Mainer for a year. I lived in what I was calling Kittery, and Kate kept correcting me, and she'd say, "No, Janet, it's Kittery," and I'd say, Kittery properly afterwards. But I was driving over the bridge one day from Kittery to Portsmouth one early morning to go down to Cambridge, and it was a freezing cold February, just past dawn, and I looked over at Portsmouth Harbor and I saw something happening above the water that I'd never heard of, I'd never seen before. And writing the poem for me, first I had to figure out what it was and then try to figure out how to find language for it. But you Mainers are probably familiar. It's called Sea Smoke. And if you ever, you can always Google it and see a picture, but there's nothing like seeing the color and the shapes. And when I saw it, these columns, many columns of steam were rising up into this beautiful dawn light and then bending over into triangles because of the breeze. It was beyond beautiful. So, Sea Smoke. Frost on a window, indistinguishable from roses knotted into a curtain, burning as blue dawn drains into it from the backyard apple, its parabola of ruddy spheres, what's left of summer. Across the fence, a red boat's dry docked, buttoned against snow that won't arrive until later. Warming your hands at a cup of coffee in the kitchen, you send your wish into the hemlocks and beyond them to the bridge that takes you away commuting days. You want to root here into the waters going and coming, to be home, to be home in this old place long skirts hurried through to the small barn a Mexican restaurant worker rents now. Instead, you layer sweaters, walk out to scrape ice from the car, coughing like luck into drive. Past the square that plows have already heaped into drifts, you slide onto the bridge and, how can it be worded, the braiding tensions of the current, the light the world flows inside, have turned to precious metals. Every register of platinum and rose gold issues into the frigid channel, coaxed by sun into thermal plumes, bright steam, cooling to droplets bent by air into pyramids, dozens of them, seemingly still. You stop, idling for minutes to let the bridge raise, then drop the day's first fruit, a form of fog exhaled by water, already gone, as the future accumulates in the rearview mirror, an apple tree, dirt brown, disappearing into the chapel of its vanished leaves. You want to take another one?
I was going to ask which book that's from because I don't remember it as well.
It's from And Not to Break. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe just hearing it, and maybe I just haven't heard it before. And it's
I don't read it that often.
Yeah. I also picked a lot of tonight's poems. My kind of secondary theme was things I don't read very often because a lot of the people here are Littoral Books people who have heard me a few times and who know me. So I was trying to pick different things. So that's cool that I got an unexpected one too. I see what you mean about the visual in your work because it's so you can see every second of what you're saying.
Mm.
I don't know how you do that, but I enjoy it very much.
Thank you, Littoral Books.
All right. Speaking, I don't think I've ever read this out of reading before, so I'm going to go with this one. It's actually a persona poem, so the I is not I. So it's somebody else's talking about their significant other, not my own. And I've never really explained who the I is, and it's not defined clearly in the poem, but in You're Ruining My Loneliness, I had this poem in my original manuscript come after a poem about my grandfather, hoping that having just read that one, the reader would move to this one and by chance maybe make the connection that the persona of this poem is my grandfather and not me. And it's okay if they don't. But that was the one time I've tried to be a little bit heavy-handed with a reader, and that was the time when Agnes said, "Oh, we'd like to rearrange just two of the poems and switch their positions so that a two-pager will open on the same page." And it was these ones that got broken apart. And that was the one time I tried to. There were two sets in a row that I was trying to have inform each other. I was like, "See, there's your lesson of not trying to manipulate the reader in that way. Just let them do their thing."
Mm-hmm.
So this is a persona poem called Flight Toward Memorial. The plane leers at gravity like a heathen eagle. Inverted, a black cloud city presses sunset into thin lips on the horizon. I'm not supposed to be here. Without you, morning is a travesty. But my coffee, those dewy chrysanthemums, insist. Horses in the waves, my chilly old bones blur. Who are these women with their large eyes? Your hummingbirds keep coming back. Here I sit, in the wrong seat. You, a box of ash at my feet. Tomorrow I'll give you my gift to the sea. A steel pocket full of nations rides a dull blade through the sky. This was supposed to be a miracle. That horizon is a tease. We know this, but there's nothing else to look at. Nothing to breathe but each other's goodbye kisses.
Mm. Wonderful. Do you want to do another one now? Do you want me to I just bit my tongue, or do you want me to?
Does your tongue need a moment?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
You know what I'm noticing? We both write about coffee a lot.
We do. I heard that as I said it out loud.
I wonder what that means. Do you want to do one or do you want me?
There you go.
Okay, you go, you
All
go.
right, you go.
Okay. I think this is the last I'll read from A Not to Break, because then I think I'll read one final poem from a new manuscript that I'm working on. This is the last poem in And Not to Break. It's called Prologue. Little perverse, but last night we fell asleep before the end of the world. Another lengthy TV special, bursting gamma rays, rogue asteroids, supervolcanoes, latent nuclear fiascos. Awake until computer technologists created intelligences turned against us. We didn't wonder why. To be human is first to try to flee, but then to burn, drown, freeze, and gasp with surfeit and or lack. The 2 bouquets of dahlias, burnt orange and lavender tipped, shading to purple that you brought back from the market and mixed, drank hard anyway, their stems thickly visible in a clear vase, their petals candle flame shaped, perking up. When we awakened, the end of weeks of drought and the 7th and final threat to existence coincided. The worst news wasn't hard to try to bear. A flooding fragrance, sweeter than the dahlias, streamed through the open windows. Dirt, cream, parsley, burnt sugar. We opened the door to the porch that hot ghost had pressed against for so long. You can take one, and then, do you want me to actually finish with my last, or do you want to do one and do your last?
Sure, I'll do one and do my last. I love that your last poem is called Prologue. Did it start that way, or was it meant to be a prologue and then you flipped it later, or did it?
No, I planned it that way the whole time. Yeah. Well, actually, I think I had a different title. And I decided I wanted it last in the manuscript, and just because I'm me, I called it Prologue.
One of my first poetry teachers would always have us try in the revision process and exploring any new poem, and you weren't sure where to go with it. She would always say, try putting the end at the beginning and see where you go from there. So I do that sometimes when I'm putting together a collection, or when I was putting Your Ruin and My Loneliness together. It was the one that one would think would be the last one in the book. It's like, well, let's put that at the beginning and then see how the order flows from there. It's always
Yeah,
trick
in my first book, that Mulberry Wine, the first poem in the book is called Return. So I can't do that anymore. I've done it twice. Yeah, I've used that up. But
yeah, I know mine starts with Dear After. All right, I'll do one, and then I'd love to hear your last, and then I'll do my last, and we can chat about our new things in general.
Mhm.
All right. This is a newer one as well. That is one of Grace's favorites. She always says, you have to read the mushroom one. And it's a newer poem. You and I both love to nerd out about mushrooms and all things strange in nature. So I will go with this one. Mushrooms can consume nuclear waste. Without a taste, not a tingle, no trace of that namesake cloud. It cannot be said enough. They root in the walls of Chernobyl and use the filth to grow until it's gone. Just like that, history capped. Then we can eat it like it's from the store on Sunday. They'll swallow up the plastic islands too. I tell my daughter on our dinner walk, the lowering sun too bright to look at. She'll only let me hold her hand at dark. Why are we doing anything else? She asks. We pass little tan caps sprung up overnight from spongy soil at the end of a rainy summer. I surrender. Save us.
That's great. That's great.
I think the fragment of a line too bright to look at might be the title of whatever collection comes next.
Ooh,
But
I like it.
we'll see.
Yeah,
Although
yeah.
Grace wants it to be Squirrels of Chaos. That's a different new poem.
I'll talk with her about
Okay.
this.
Well, there's Squirrels of Chaos can be the secret other title.
That sounds like an MFA workshop, actually. Okay. I'm going to read my last poem. It's not necessarily the first poem in a new manuscript that I'm working on. I'm working on a new book tentatively called Color Wheel, that's going to have as its spine within the book a series of poems about color. And it's interestingly, I started out trying, this was about 5 years ago or so, to write about race, and found I was getting all tangled up trying to do that. And I thought, I need another way in. And suddenly I was writing about the spectrum. This poem is the blue poem. I've begun to work on red and green now, and they're nothing I ever expected. This poem, what I have to do is I think about the color, I intuitively feel the color, and then I look for whatever obsession I find having to do with it. And that can be shorter or longer, it's turning out. So in this one, I read a news article about the finding of the body, actually not the whole body, but the jaw of a mummified medieval nun from the 11th century in Dahlheim, Germany. And she was fascinating scientists because they found blue in what remained of the plaque on her teeth. And I actually have a good friend who's a dentist, and this poem is dedicated to him. But the scientists discovered that what the blue was left in her fossilized jaw was lapis lazuli. And if you know, it's an opaque gemstone, a beautiful blue color that looks like it has little points of light in it if you're lucky. And finding this nun with blue in her jaw has caused art historians to rethink what they know about who illustrated medieval manuscripts, because everyone used to think that all those gorgeous books and some of the paintings also that were done solely by monks who were the illustrators, you know, pouring in their cold stone monasteries, pouring over, you know, they were in charge of the word and of the book. And as it turned out, there's now a theory that nuns were also illustrating, which suddenly gives an agency to female artists that is entirely different. And so I started doing research about lapis and discovered that it was actually, you know, brought to a place like Germany from Afghanistan, which is where the gemstone primarily comes from. And I started looking at a lot of medieval paintings and that amazing blue in medieval paintings, which is of course made from lapis. And so I go into this sort of immersion when I do this. I know I sound like a total nerd, and that's because I am.
Well,
So
you're among your friends here.
I know that I do know that. So in this poem, I'm with the nun as she's doing her work, and also putting her into a painting that I'm making, and that painting is the poem. It's called The Nun of Dalheim. Jesu, oh, I probably should say this is in 5-line prose poem stanzas rather than a conventional stanza line. The Nun of Dalheim. Jesu blazes into her head, snow whitening the monastery. Beyond away, past far seas, the ancient mines of Sare song sourced her sacks of rough on donkeys' backs, managing mountain passes, Afghanistan to Germany, for her to mix a hue exceeding reason for the Virgin's robe, rolling folds, the imagination opens. Fingers chilblained, breath the sulfur of old egg, she makes heat, a hard pip of nipple between Mary's fingers, gushing fluid, luminously blue into the infant's mouth. Angels watch 3 deep behind her where she stands. Vellum drinks color as if lambskin thirsts. She licks her brush and lays down heaven. Newton's prism is 600 years away, 800 Goethe's shades made by light, an image fixed first, then increasingly distant from a prism. What is a parallelogram to a girl? In the corner of her cell, a mouse stirs under straw, red, red-orange, words exceeding yellow-green. The baby's face, heavy-featured, tender as a saint's, upper middle-aged. Childhood hasn't been invented yet. Out the dormer, the convent yard's hedges stripped of rose hips and bilberries. God waits between violet and green. Leafless canes rhyme with ice. She draws a crowd then, men lean toward mother and son. White light breaking bedward behind them, ends of the spectrum join, pulsating into faces, outstretched hands. A red stag rises out of swamp water, antlers dripping with weeds, brown and green. The metrical beats of her brush strike the only sound now. She's here, a jawbone, fossilized, partial. The 12th century supported in its palm 10 teeth, chips of lapis embedded in what was plaque, color of ache, of constancy, of the divine survived. Her virgin's gaze smolders in our eyes, touching to fire a starry sky, ground to powder. Thank you.
Thank you. When you were introducing that, you said something about your process of saying you intuitively feel the color. Can you talk more about what that means? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I please repeat that. I just looked at lapis lazuli is toxic when mixed with, I have to see what it's toxic.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, gotta get rid of that. Oh, I can't see it. You go, Kate. No, I'll see that note later.
Yes, Robert can help us.
Yeah.
Well, my question was, when you were introducing that poem and talking about your series and talking about color, you said something about how you intuitively feel your way into the color. Curious what that means.
Well, into what the form that the color will take, something that has to do with, I knew I wanted to write about blue, right? But I didn't know what the sky, a ring. And I read the newspaper article about discovering the lapis in the nun's teeth. And I thought, OMG, that's it. You know? And I thought, can I make a poem out of dental plaque?
Oh.
Is that possible? And I thought, well, just keep you know, I'm always saying to students, go deeper, go deeper. So I just kept going deeper. And Nancy Walters, I think I see where you're going with your comments, and that's probably what killed her. The toxic color, but that's for another poem. I want her to live in this poem.
When mixed
Yeah.
with water, if it is a powder and you lick the brush, you will die.
It
It's
might not have been,
sulfur-based. It's sulfur-based, so therefore it becomes more toxic when mixed with water.
Oh,
yeah,
And
maybe it wasn't mixed with water though.
right.
You know, because you mix oils, for example, with yeah, you mix oils with linseed sometimes, or you mix paint with linseed sometimes, you thin it with that. So it'll be curious, but yeah, I think a lot of artists probably died of their colors without knowing it,
Hmm.
right? Without knowing it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah, so I have to find the thing
Mhm.
that sort of weds to the color, and I can't logically say, oh well, I want to move this along, so I'll choose this, and just it has to be something I see it and I just know,
Mhm.
you know, even if I think I can't do that. And maybe that's part of why I choose what I do is the challenge.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, dental plaque.
Of course. Got a poem with toothpaste spatter in it. So good. I do kind of love when a poem has the element of something kind of gross in it, because it's so much less expected. You know,
Yeah.
people think poetry is something that's more lofty and things. No, sometimes it's dental plaque.
Exactly. Yeah, go, oh, read well, I don't know if you want to close with toothpaste spatter, but I like that poem.
All right. Well, I'll close with Old Women, since we have the nun. Um, I'll close with a newer poem again about my grandmother, because I have some poet friends who have been reading a lot of poems about their grandmothers that are these wonderful, nourishing, loving relationships. And I do have a loving relationship with my grandmother, but she is not your typical grandmother. She's a very singular and not an easy person, and that is sometimes a good thing and sometimes a bad thing. Um, but this is a poem for her while she's still with us. She's in her 90s now. Um, this is Song of My Living Grandmother. She wrote corrections in Rachel Carson's margins,
Hmm.
changed saltiness to salinity, added Precambrian, Mesozoic beside romantic descriptions of geologic eras. Her gray script etched exact. Once I watched her scale the seawall, uproot bittersweet growing rogue from the ledge, using only her bare brown. The soil shallow, granite and clay not far beneath, and roots no match for her glare. Once she smelled like soil and garlic's papery shell. At the assisted living where she pushes her lunch around, I tell her we planted the garlic, so she'll know it's late October. I cut her toenails right, ingrown same as mine, thank her for the practice. She laughs loud, like a cave on an island far from any place. For more than 3/4 of geologic time, Carson writes, the continents were desolate and uninhabited. To which my grandmother added, all the rest of geologic time, 1/4 the total. What are her years compared to the stone in her pocket, kept because she found it, if not beautiful, then worthy? Its smoothness, when her fingers find it, a delight. She's been a good mother to the earth. One Halloween, my aunt tells me, she borrowed a horse, clasped a black cloak above her curls, and, headless, galloped at the children in the dark. We pissed ourselves with fear, my aunt laughs. My mother doesn't tell stories from that time. I sit beside the seat she's been assigned. Hi, honey, my grandmother says. She asks what's on the plate, worries it won't be saved for supper. Oh, shorn Medusa, your cave's gone dark. You know this voice, which echoes from all the women in your line, but do you know it's mine? In your face, a page in memory riffles, but doesn't open. Gone your snakes, their cool, familiar skin. Will they know you in the next world?
I love that poem.
Thank you.
Here's your heart.
Kate and Janet, you both get my heart. This was such a wonderful night of listening. And Janet, I didn't realize how much, well, how much, but maybe that's a hyperbole, but you reference stones so much. And of course, working in the jewelry industry, I appreciate that. Marcasite, lapis lazuli. There were some other references in there too, and I thought, huh, very interesting. Are there any questions from the audience? Anybody want to comment or ask Janet or Kate a question? Do you have questions for each other? Janet, what's next for you? You're doing something very interesting coming up. Would you care to explain you won
Ofsted.
Yes. Oh, the Ofsted. I'm
Do you mind telling us about that? Or?
This is the third or fourth time I've done this, usually for a whole semester, but in October I'm for a week. I'm going to be the writer in residence at Truman State University in Missouri, way out there in the middle. It's the Arts University in Missouri, and I have a pass there actually. I was driving across country one time, and it's in Kirksville, Missouri. I stayed at a Super 8 motel in Kirksville, Missouri. And so I feel like this was fate in some way, but this is something they do every semester. They have a different either scholar in residence or artist in residence. So I'll go out for a week and I'm teaching a class on that'll meet every day for that week in the morning on lyric essays, sudden fiction, and prose poems, with poetry sort of the premise is poetry is at the heart of all of that. And then I'll be doing a big reading out there. And I just think it'll be really fun. Truman, I'm already thinking of it as a kind of a space station in the middle of Missouri. So it should be interesting. And I'm looking forward to it. We're already working on things, so it feels closer than it actually is. But thank you for asking, Robert.
Well, I think both of you.
While you are away for a week. Where will Thelma the kitty be while you're away for the whole week?
My neighbor downstairs, Linda, really kindly, she's never seen Thelma, but she loves to come up and feed her when I'm away. So she will take care of her. Yeah.
Thelma, one New Year's Eve, Thelma graced me with eye contact, and I will never be the same.
That's probably what's happened to her. She'll never be the same either. Yeah. Thelma was a rescue cat who literally didn't come out from under a bed for 6 months, and then for about another 6 months would let me look at her but never touch her. She was terribly abused, I think, and she's turned into quite the little grande dame now. And she likes lots of attention. So I've created a monster.
Yeah. Oh, did she come out of her shell?
Yeah, she did.
All right. Well, I'm going to make the sales pitch for you. I encourage everyone to look up Janet's book, And Not to Break. The
Thank
cover
you.
art is really cool. And to find her other books if needed. I love it. I got to proofread it, so I got a sneak peek.
It's true. It's true.
True.
And I don't need to
throw in the chat or anything. But...
I don't need to encourage this crowd to read Kate's book. So